confusion, so I'm not sure, but I just texted him to let him know that we're in Penny's room. So hopefully everybody starts joining us there and he can communicate that to everybody.
Okay, so I think maybe we should begin just because, all right? So anyway, I think I know everybody here. I'm actually not the Dean of the School of Education. This is the Dean's Lecture Series. But Penny Hamrick, who is our Dean, was called away to a provost meeting and asked me to at least begin the session. She'll join us later. Those of you who know me, I'm Dom Gullo. I'm a professor in early childhood education, and thus that's why I was given the responsibility to open this up, because this is a focused session on early childhood. Elizabeth Farwell Ozer is going to be running the session, and she is the policy and special projects manager at First Up, an early education nonprofit organization. She's worked in education and policy for most of her life, with the mission of enacting change for children through programs, policies, and systems. She began her career working as an educator in high school, with experiences in educational settings ranging from the School District of Philadelphia to charter schools, to environmental programs and residential behavior institutions. She has worked with students from pre-K through college, and she shifted from direct instruction with these individuals to policy work in 2015. Elizabeth received her master's degrees both in education, elementary education, and in education policy from the University of Pennsylvania. She has undergone fellowships with Philadelphia's City Council, with Pennsylvania's Office of Child Development and Early Learning, and the Delaware Valley Association for the Education of Young Children. Some of you may know that as DeVacy, which First Up used to be DeVacy. And she joined First Up in 2015 as a P3, or that means pre-K through third grade program manager, for those of you who are not well-versed in the early childhood lingo, and supervising a grant-funded program initiative to support pre-K through third grade teachers. She now works in public policy, in the public policy department, and primarily focuses on advancing the needs of early learning field through legislative advocacy. And personally, from a personal perspective, Elizabeth lives with her husband, daughter, and goddaughter in Germantown section of Philadelphia. I'm really excited because I have not seen No Small Matter yet. And No Small Matter is a documentary that uses scientific evidence to demonstrate the importance of early childhood education and development. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Elizabeth, who will take us through the session guidelines. Elizabeth?
Great. Well, thank you so much, Dom, for having me today. And thank you everyone for joining us. It's exciting to be part of this virtual event. As an educator and now parent, I know what children are capable of when they receive high quality care, as well as when they do not. Because the brain develops most in the first 3 years of life, it's essential for us to support these young learners during their early development. At First Up, we support early educators and early education programs by providing the best in care and early learning. These two things are actually the same for young people. Care and education are intermixed. But quality care today is really expensive for families, as well as challenging and expensive for childcare providers to enact. So there is some support needed, unfortunately. Today, as we are realizing, I believe, childcare is taking a bigger focus in American conversations. Many parents are working from home with their young children present, as well as worrying about where they might find care when they are ready to return to work. Some childcare programs are in danger of going out of business, and many workers in the childcare industry are seeking other work to take care of their own families. So as we're sort of juggling these different dynamics, it's really important for us to think about what is important in caring for young children and how does that impact the lives of everyone. The film we're about to see, No Small Matter, illustrates the importance of early learning to children, to families, and to our society at large. After the film, we'll hear from our local experts, Carol Austin, Alex Kalanko, and Leslie Spina, about the issues that are involved in their work in providing early education on different levels. If you have any questions for the presenters or about the film, you're welcome to enter them in the chat box, and we'll do our best to answer them after the discussion. And we hope that you will enjoy the film and enjoy the conversation afterwards. All right, I'm going to share my screen and we'll view the film. I'm sorry, one more time. We practiced that this morning. All right, great.
Elizabeth,
We are hearing this.
there's no sound.
Or an architect who says, forget,
Let me move that.
we'll take it from here. If we kept that up much longer, we totally would have lost you. And chances are, we wouldn't have gotten you back. The point is, beginnings matter. Like a basketball team that doesn't play defense the whole first quarter. Or an architect who says, forget the blueprint, let's just start building. Or a stand-up comic who skips the setup and goes right to the punchline.
28.
But the place beginnings matter most in life is, well, life.
Babies in the beginnings of humanity grew up in these very rich extended families. Not just mothers, but fathers, grandmothers, friends, cousins. And they were all there all the time with the children. So in that kind of context, in that kind of a village, caring for children, teaching them, just getting the work done that you need, they all take place at the same time. And of course, the world that we live in now is a very, very different world from that.
Parents are increasingly having to raise kids on their own, and they are also having to do it while they have to work in order to earn enough to even support a family at all. What people now have come to understand is that these early childhood years, for reasons of brain development, for reasons of personality development, are more important than anything else. The central problem is that our society has a diminished capacity to support parents in doing what society expects them and needs them to do. Why a society would do this is a bit of a mystery.
Here's an enemy that most folks don't even know we need to fight.
our children, our families in this country. Ignoring this and just going on as if it's going to correct itself, that's a disaster for us as a society.
So welcome to our movie about early childhood education. If we do our job, by the time we're done, you'll view this baby and the world just a little bit differently. Because this isn't an expose, it's a wake-up call to start seeing early childhood for what it is, a grown-up issue, a game changer, to start seeing it as no small matter.
What do you think you do at your house if you can't get a diaper on a baby? This is how you do it at your house? My name is Rachel Giannini, Giannini.
And do you have a title? Is your title?
I would be lead teacher. We are at Highland Park Community Nursery School and Daycare Center, and we are in the yellow room. Brianna told me how she learned how to change a diaper. How did you learn? Your mom taught you. How did your mom teach you? Today we're going to start a unit about how we learn. They're starting to develop this idea that you have this computer inside of your head that you can't see, and it controls everything about you. And how do you know I have a brain? Because if you don't have a brain, your head and it will be like. Kids this age are far more capable than you and I would ever give them credit for. So when you give them the materials and you give them some knowledge, they're able to run with it. Okay, we are going to have a very important discussion. Number one, when do we start to learn? I don't know. Is it the first day of school? No. No, I would agree with that. Playtime. When do we start to learn? Rug time. Rug time? Let's take away school. Anna, what did you say? The day I was born. The day what happened the day you were born? You started to do what? Started playing. You started playing, and when you play, you learn. Ayana, that is exactly right. You started to learn the day you were born.
Babies are born learning. There is a brain ready to learn, and it's ready to learn especially from other people. A social brain. Our work on imitation, I think, helped show that. I remember sitting in front of this 42-minute-old baby who had never seen a tongue before. I poked out my tongue at her, and she responded with tongue protrusion back. I opened and closed my mouth. She watched my lips move and responded by opening and closing her mouth. This is a phenomenal thing. The baby had never seen her own face, but yet she was able to connect her own body to my body. And it was a dramatic demonstration to me that we are born learning.
For some 2,000 years, people thought that babies and young children were sort of defective grown-ups. So they defined babies and young children in terms of all the things that they were missing. So they were irrational, they were egocentric, they couldn't understand the relationships between cause and effect, or take the perspective of another person. The picture was that there really wasn't very much that was going on until children got to be about the age that you went to school.
If you're ready, up goes the curtain.
About 35 years ago, maybe, we started really changing our view.
All right, great. So we're just going to have her choose between the puppets now? All right, that was the helpful guy, wasn't it?
One thing that happened is that we got new technologies that actually let us study babies in new ways. Hi, Robin. Hi. That completely revolutionized our picture about what babies and young children were like.
This is very, very new.
We're the first in the world to put a baby in an MEG machine. It's perfectly safe and non-invasive. It's like a stethoscope for the brain.
We're just going to slowly place him in the car seat, just like you would. I'm going to plug him in on the side here.
MEG, magnetoencephalography, allows you to measure the firing of the neurons in the brain as a child is doing something, like listening to a word.
2 little monkeys high up in the trees.
Or interacting with mom.
Hi. What do you want?
Okay, as you can see, mom is talking to the baby, and we're getting very, very good attention on the part of the infant. Let's look at right frontal.
For the first time in history, we can see what's happening in the baby's brain before they can talk back to us.
挂在手上，都不错哈。好，那我们现在来数。
What we found is that children learn more and learn earlier than anyone ever expected. Babies are doing something remarkable without anybody knowing it's going on. The baby brain is actually taking statistics as they listen to us talk. They don't know words yet, but they can tell the frequency of the sounds. While you're talking to the baby's brain is reacting, trying to get ready to talk back to you. People have the tendency to think there's nothing going on up there. What's going on up there is rocket science.
In fact, the first 3 years of life are like a big bang for the brain. An explosion of 86 billion neurons connecting to each other over 1 million times a second as babies interact with the world and the people around them. These connections form pathways that wire together different parts of the brain. So many pathways that starting around age 3, the brain hits the brakes and kicks into use it or lose it mode.
There's this kind of inflection point where the connections that have been used a lot get to be stronger and stronger. And the connections that aren't used disappear. They're pruned, as people say.
And whether or not the connection is strengthened or dies back is experience dependent, right? It's based on our experiences. So literally, our experiences shape our brains.
Our brains grow faster during the first 5 years of life than they ever will again. And the older we get, the harder it is to change what's there.
This is why this early period is so important. If you miss the right experiences or if you disrupt those circuits, then you have some weakened foundation that your brain is going to have to deal with for the rest of your life.
So what has the biggest impact on how well the brain gets wired? Us.
Who is that?
It's not flashcards or fancy apps that build a healthy brain. It's everyday back and forth interactions with loving, supportive adults. School is basically anywhere with anyone.
Come on, let's show Madely's favorite game. Okay, you got her legs?
Yep.
Okay.
Social interaction is brain food for the child's healthy development.
Hi, baby.
These everyday moments with the child are actually learning moments for the child.
The science has never been clearer. Babies' early experiences and the connections that they have with those important adults in their lives during this time of incredible brain development create the foundation for all that follows.
You want pet Koopa? Oh, is he giving you kisses?
So this really raises the stakes on what we provide for children in the earliest years of life. If we don't get that right, then from then on, we're basically fixing something that's broken.
A baby pumpkin! Pick it up. To Huffy.
The good news is we know what kids need to thrive. The bad news, we're making it harder and harder for parents to give it to them.
This is the portrait of a very important bride. She is the wife and mother of America. Her job is to make a home, the American home. Today, it is perhaps the most important job in the world.
So we have all of this research from social scientists, from neuroscientists, telling us why it's so important to invest in young children from birth to 5. At the
same time, we have these old-fashioned notions around the role of women. Why should a baby be anywhere but with a mom until she's 3 or 5?
Families look very, very different than they did 30, 40, 50, 20 years ago.
Not that long ago, a high school diploma and a good attitude was enough to get you a job where one salary could support one family with a couple of kids.
Today, there are so many families where both parents have to work. Or if there's only one parent, that parent is working.
More women are in the workforce. More women are in the workforce that have children under the age of 5.
The demands of work are radically different. The unpredictable work hours that families have to navigate, for example.
You may or may not live close to your family, and so that creates a challenge.
Parents need this support. This is not a luxury.
We pretend that it's Ozzie and Harriet days, and, there's someone who's taking care of the baby. Well, who's taking care of the baby?
Hi, big girl. Hi. Hi. Hey. 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 I'm cooking.
I don't want to go back to work tomorrow.
Let's just spend like $10 a day playing the lottery until we strike it big. I'll start off with $1 million. What do you say? Sending her to a daycare center was not something we wanted to do for at least a year. But we're in a home where both of us have to work in order to survive. We have to work.
You see your daddy?
It's not like there's a smorgasbord of childcare out there. We were lucky to find what we found. It was a scramble, like we were going to childcare facilities every day. The availability is slim to none. We really only have a few options, despite teacher ratio, despite class size. They all cost the same. Of course, it's going to require us to basically scale back some of our spending and appropriate some of our savings. You want to hold this for me? I don't know how people do it. I really don't. Let's go change you. Come on. You want to change clothes? Sorry.
So tomorrow, you have to go to school, okay? And I know you'll be okay. You're a big, strong girl.
No one's going to love your child the way you do. Nobody's going to care for your child the way you will. But I'm looking for the closest thing to it. So sorry that I have to do this to you. It's so rough. You're just so not ready for this. All right, let's go. If I could stay at home, I'd stay home in a heartbeat.
No system of care and support for infants and toddlers in the United States. Instead, when you have a baby, it's like being born into the Wild West. You got to fend for yourself and make it work.
Every week, more than 11 million American children under the age of 5 spend over half their waking hours in the care of someone other than their parents. The cost of that care is soaring. In 28 states, it's now more expensive to put a baby in childcare than it is to send a kid to public college. But just 10% of the child care in America is considered high quality. So you pretty much have no idea what you're going to get once that door closes.
When I had my second son, I quickly began to realize that childcare was going to cost us $2,000 a month. That was the mortgage.
I have what I can imagine is a very good starting out first job, after college, and I still cannot afford childcare.
I would either have to work to sustain childcare, but I wouldn't be able to pay my other bills. Or I would just have to, stay at home and not pay childcare to take care of my child, but then I'm not making any income.
But if you go for a subsidy or you go to ask for money to help, they look at you funny because they're like, you make too much. You don't make enough to do that. So I'm stuck in that kind of middle class bracket.
I didn't have anywhere to go. I did not have any structural support. And I ended up having to move into a homeless shelter.
My son cried so much at that daycare within this woman's home that eventually I had to quit my job because while I couldn't prove it, I knew something was wrong. And he was too young to articulate anything. As he got a little older, he was able to tell me, Mommy, she just yelled. She yelled and screamed a lot.
Kaylee was not our first pregnancy. We actually miscarried with twins and then miscarried again after that. So being able to have a viable live birth and child was even more, we wanted to take care of her even more so. I'm getting teary. Because of the fact that, it took us that much to get her here. Yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't know this was gonna happen. That putting her life in someone else's hands means so much. So from the beginning, knowing what I saw in childcare, I didn't want to put her there. So we just, bounced her around family member to family member until we made the decision for her dad to stay home.
This is not the way it's supposed to be.
Look, the most critical point in a kid's life is right now, right? So if they're 8, it's right now. If they're 12, it's right now. But I'm going to tell you this. The investment you do in that young person from the very beginning gives you the best possibility of scaling this thing and being successful. Because in the end, this will pay off dividends for this country in a way that nothing else will.
Shay Gaddis is about as close to living proof of that as you can get. Gaddis is the executive director of the Flatbush YMCA in Brooklyn. He also happens to be one of the subjects of a landmark early learning study that's been tracking him for more than 40 years, the Abecedarian Project. Launched in 1972 by researchers in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, the study was designed to examine the long-term impact of full-day, high-quality early care and education on low-income children like Shay.
I started when I was 3 months old. I do have vivid memories, and I remember sort of games, puzzles, those kind of things, which today I can't stop playing with puzzles, to be quite honest. The puzzles was here.
4.5 decades in, the results of the study are striking. As a group, Gaddis and his former classmates are healthier, they're better educated, they make more money, and they're less likely to have committed a crime than a group of similar kids the study also tracked who didn't attend the program.
My mom, she had me when she was 15, so my grandparents raised me from birth. Neither one of them had a third grade education, couldn't read or write. So from my own experience, here's a child that grew up with limited resources, but was able to attain a level playing field in the classroom. If I didn't have the Abecedarian program, probably wouldn't have had that chance.
We have a chance of ending intergenerational poverty. Today in this country, you're born into poverty, odds are you're going to end up as an adult in poverty. High quality early childhood education, that's a strong possibility of breaking that cycle.
Abecedarian is one of several long-term studies that show when it comes to children, the earlier we invest, the bigger the payoff for society.
Compared to all the things then we do for the rest of their life, we are writing checks that are so much more expensive than what it would have been had we invested when they were little.
Put a dollar value on not having to retain a child. You can put a dollar value on the healthcare implications long term. You can put a dollar value on not needing special ed. You can put a dollar value on the child graduating high school, getting a better job, and not paying taxes. In particular, you can put dollar values on the cost of crime, which is huge. You won't find a better public return than investing in early childhood education.
Hi, we are inviting families to our parenting program. It's free and it's for moms that have babies. They can attend the program with the babies. ¿Cómo está?
Avance is a two-generation program that partners parent education about child development with early childhood education for little ones 0 to 3. Almost 30% of people in Waco live in poverty. There are zip codes and census tracts in Waco where 1 in 4 children go hungry.
The 1-year-old at that house, 1 year old, he doesn't know how to sit up. We were in shock with that kid. We were like, wow, he's 1 and he can't say anything. He doesn't sit up. He doesn't walk.
You can work with children until you're blue in the face, but if the home environment is also not transformed, then that child's opportunities for success will be limited.
We've been seeing the impacts of early childhood adversity on health, on behavior, on life outcomes for a very, very, very long time. But what we now know is the mechanism. We know how early adversity leads to all of these different negative outcomes. And that is what we now understand to be toxic stress.
To understand toxic stress, we've got to understand the stress response system itself.
The stress response system is this amazing evolutionary system that was designed to save our lives. The folks who did not evolve a stress response, they're gone. They got eaten.
So let's imagine you're a 1-year-old in prehistoric times. You've just woken up from your nap, you're hungry, and your loincloth really needs changing. So you step outside the cave, and nobody's there. Instinctively, you know something's wrong. Without adults there to care for you, you're totally helpless. And that's when your stress response system kicks into gear.
Immediately, what happens is that our brain sends a signal to release stress hormones. So we release adrenaline and cortisol, and these hormones activate a whole slew of changes in our brains and bodies. Our heart starts to pound, our pupils dilate, our airways open up. The brain tells you, you're in a dangerous situation, you need to do whatever it takes to protect yourself.
So you do the one thing you can to tell the world you need help. And then Mom, Dad, or Grandma Grog comes along, your stress response system powers down, and you know everything's gonna be okay. Fast forward 40,000 years. Stress is still a part of everyday life for babies and young children, even if some of the causes are a little bit different. The stress response evolved to switch on immediately in the face of a threat.
Now it's a pot lid on Daddy's head.
But it's the comforting presence of caring adults that teaches the brain to switch it off when the threat is past.
We're just talking about being responsive. Just letting a child see that when she sends out a signal that she's distressed or scared, she can count on the fact that a caregiver is going to be there in some way to help address that situation.
But what if the stress in a young child's life never stops? Violence in the home or in the neighborhood, parental drug addiction, incarceration, or mental health problems, severe neglect or abuse. And what if the adults around that child don't or can't help them cope with it?
When children are experiencing situations of fear and adversity, and they do not have that buffering caregiver, they continue to pump out high levels of adrenaline and cortisol.
And here's the problem. If that stress hormone stays elevated, it actually starts to disrupt the development of brain circuits.
And then we start to see the health problems that are associated with toxic stress.
Toxic stress takes direct aim at the prefrontal cortex, undermining a child's ability to concentrate, control their emotions, or get along with others. A biological problem that becomes a behavioral one when a child gets to school.
The brain basically goes on fight or flight mode. So when they walk into a classroom, they continue to respond as if they're in a stressful, dangerous, unpredictable environment. But to a teacher, that child looks like they're just misbehaving. That's a problem child.
When my kids show symptoms of toxic stress, they get suspended. I literally saw a patient in clinic 2 weeks ago who has been suspended 26 times from transitional kindergarten. The child is 5 years old.
But the damage from toxic stress goes beyond the developing brain.
There are also effects on metabolism, on the immune system, on the cardiovascular system, with profound consequences for physical health and mental health.
When those markers are set in childhood, they impact the way our bodies work for the rest of our lives. Heart disease, cancer, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Experiencing high doses of early adversity doubles your risk for 7 out of 10 of the leading causes of death in the United States of America. That's nuts.
Kids growing up in low-income families are especially vulnerable to toxic stress. Today, that's nearly half the children under 6 in America.
So when I think about toxic stress, I think about how it cascades down. The electricity bill can't be paid, your lights go out, you can't put things on the table, everybody's unhappy. After a while, adults are relating in certain ways that aren't healthy, children are relating in certain ways that aren't healthy, you're living in a community that's doing things that's not healthy, and all of it begins to have a cumulative impact on a 5-year-old.
So this actually argues for why we shouldn't be thinking just about the children, because children live in families. We cannot transform the lives of children if we don't transform the lives of their parents as well.
Part of helping families make that shift is helping them create a dream and a goal, and then think about what are the steps that I need to do in order to make that dream a reality.
Let me finish on the potatoes.
I was working in the chicken plants for like 7-8 years, working on the 2 plants. My first husband used to like be in jail a lot of times, and I'd be like taking care of my kids by myself. So that's why it's struggling me to go to both jobs. I was going to work at 12 midnight, get off at 6, and then at 6 go to house, pick up the babies, get them dressed for school, drop it at school, and then go to my second job at 8 in the morning, get up at 5, buy some fast food, take them to the bed like around 6:37 almost, and they didn't like it. They want to be outside work, playing and having fun, and I was so exhausted, I couldn't do it. I worked in the restaurants for like 5 years when I was 13 years old. So I kind of like understand it. And then I was one day on the street, and then these girls were passing flyers. They told me, no, there's a good program. Avance, they can help you out if you want to finish ED, and they can take care of the baby for free, and they teach you how to be with the kids. So I was like, yes, this is my opportunity right there.
We're going to talk about the brain. When you have your child in a stimulating environment, his brain is going to grow. How can we exercise the brain? Singing to our children, reading to our children, talking to our children.
I'm a mom for 4 kids, and I thought I was the best mom. Like, I know how to take care of my kids. Nobody's gonna tell me what to do or how to do it, right? But no, I learned a lot of stuff from them. Like, I couldn't believe it. Hola, ¿quién habla? And then my son, I see improvement on him because now he's turned around when he hears the sounds. I learned on the eating, I learned on the education, I learned that you have to at least hug them because they can know that you love them and you're there. We find some colors. So the teachers are like helping me a lot. Buenos días. Buenos días. Goodbye, Lorenzo.
What I love about Avance is the early childhood education is forward thinking. We want our child to succeed in the future, but the ESL, GED classes and workforce development training is the here and now. So I'm going to gain the skills that I need to lift my family out of poverty.
Good morning. Good morning. We are going to continue working on some math, and then we also want to continue working on some of your writing with your constructed responses.
Always in my dream, I want to be a CNA, certificate nurse assistant. I mean, you don't get paid a lot, but at least try to start somewhere.
This program changed my life. I learned in English here. I have a better job. I can talk with my son's teacher in school.
I learned to be a better mom. I learned to understand my children and to be respectful to my kids. They help me to be as successful and dream again.
I learned if you believe it, you can have. All days I say, thank you, teacher, but I don't have nothing to pay. All they do for me. Just I wish one day all the mothers like me have this opportunity.
You know, we're gonna do it. We're all gonna finish, right? We're gonna be a better moms. Yeah. Bye, Miss Beth. Bye, Gracie. Bye, guys. Bye. I'm gonna do it because I want them to see that I did it, so they could do it. Thank you. Bye, nos vemos mañana. See you tomorrow. ¿Qué estás viendo, cámara?
Thank you everyone for watching the film with us. Again, if you've just joined us, I'm Elizabeth Farwell Ozer. I'm the Policy and Special Projects Manager at First Up, an early education nonprofit. And following the film, we've planned a panel discussion. But just briefly, no, it's a very uplifting film. Actually, not always. We really see the importance of early learning and then the extent to which it's not easily accessible for either children or families, or sustainable for those who provide the education for young learners. To help us understand what this means in our local context, I'd like to welcome our panelists. We have the Executive Director of First Up, Carol Austin. Carol, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
We have Alex Kalunko. She is an early childhood teacher at the Caring Center in West Philadelphia and the recent recipient of the Terry Lynn Lokoff National CHILDCARE Award. Hi, Alex. Thank you for joining.
Hi, Elizabeth. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
We have Christina Dugan, a at St. Mary's Nursery School. Christina, thank you for joining us today.
Sure, hi.
And Leslie Spina, the President and Executive Director of Kinder Academy, a childcare program with multiple locations in Philadelphia. Hi, Leslie.
Hi, how are you?
Great, thanks. So just for the sake of the conversation, if people are able to have your screen in speaker view, then the panelists will be enlarged for you when they respond to the questions. In addition, if you have questions, I see some people have already entered some in the chat box, but if you have questions or additional conversation you'd like to add, please feel free to do so in the chat using the chat box. So we'll discuss first just the early education environment and the issues related to that, and then we will focus a bit of what around what that means in the COVID-19 environment, which is new for all of us. Carol, I'm going to start with you. I know you've been an incredible director for us at First Up, and early childhood wasn't your main focus for some time. So I'd just like to hear what drew you to early learning from your previous work.
Great, thank you, Elizabeth. Not sure how I feel about speaker view. But so yes, to Elizabeth's point, I worked in secondary ed reform for many years and spent quite a bit of time in high schools in Philadelphia and working on behalf of teachers there and high school students and getting them connected to, life after also high school, what does college look like? The whole world of that. It's really how I started my career off. And so I know I experienced going into a lot of schools and speaking with a lot of students. And in so many of those conversations, being struck by how hungry they were and how far behind they were at the same time. And I think, you can't be someone who works in secondary ed, and in many cases, you may see some of this at the college level as well, but you can't be someone who works in secondary ed in high poverty neighborhoods and not be struck by the question, what if we'd started earlier? What if? So that is what, kind of answering that question is really what drew me to early learning, because it was there. If only we could get to these kids sooner, if only we could have something happen before, then they would have, really a fighting chance that they really desperately wanted. So, so that's really, in its simplest way, that really is what drew me to early childhood education, really ensuring, the opportunity to ensure that that foundation was solid for children, so that, as they go through their school years, they're starting from a higher base.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I think that really sets us off on a great conversation that, earlier is better. And it means a lot for children when we get to them early, helps our education dollars really stretch, in addition to just creating the conditions for a really powerful society. I'm going to shift now, Alex, to hear a little bit about what happens in an early learning environment with a high quality early learning educator. So could you describe your work as an educator as opposed to, I know many people who aren't kind of in the early childhood atmosphere might describe your work as just being a babysitter, but could you describe your work a little bit more clearly and explain kind of what you expect from children and what they're able to accomplish with high quality learning experiences?
Sure, thank you, Elizabeth. I really see my role as an educator in the classroom to kind of set the expectations for the children, set the environment so that it's not only safe, but also educational for them, and then really to just guide them through the learning process. So all day long, as the video showed, you're communicating with the children, you're having lots of not just talking to them, but talking with them and discussions, asking them those open-ended questions that are really gonna take them to another level and allow them to learn something new. but also to take, for them to take ownership of their learning and the classroom so that it's more of a community and we work together. The children have classroom jobs, they serve their own lunch. And I really set the expectations high because of my knowledge of the children in my classroom and what I know they can accomplish. And the children will have a say in, you know, what job they choose for the week. It could be sweeping, it could be setting the table, but they learn how to do it on their own. And I give them the guidance that they might need. So every routine task is set for the learning, has the children involved in the process. It's really all about the brain building and planning activities that are going to teach the children where they are developmentally. And it's really so much more than babysitting because you're intentional in what you're planning and what activities you're choosing, what materials you're putting out for them. You're selecting materials and activities that are going to meet them where they are, but also scaffold them to where you want them to go and what you want them to learn. So I think both babysitters and educators care for the children, you nurture the children, but you always ensure that they're safe. But as an educator, you really care for the whole child. It just goes beyond just the safety, the nurturing, and also extends, like we saw in the video, to educating families, helping families with whatever they might need as well.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
I'm wondering, Christina, to carry on with that, could you give us the parent perspective on the value of high quality care and what that has provided for both your children as well as your family, so that we can better understand the impact of a high quality program such as St. Mary's Nursery School where your children attend?
Sure. And that video was just like, I'm glad I was kind of like to myself, because it really hits me, like, you know, certainly in terms of my own family, but also how every child, every family deserves to have access to affordable, quality childcare. And that is not a given, you know, that it's, you know, that was only like 10% was really considered quality, and how crucial it is in these early years. I mean, within the first 2,000 days of life, that pretty much is hardwiring, you know, where the prospects are for your child. And I mean, I will admit, I mean, there's no manual for parenting. Like, I think I still have the occasional obsession about what about, you know, this book or that book or this, you know, rubric. And that's why, you know, when I found St. Mary's and, you know, the style of teaching that they offer, which is, I mean, they're Keystone Star rated. They just won an arts award through PICO for cultural work, you know, working with students. But just the peace of mind that comes with knowing and seeing, like, it doesn't matter when I arrive or who I interact with, that there is a sincere care for not only my child, but like everyone that I encounter. Every child is really cared about, and to what the teacher even alluded to, that in their own way, which I think is really unique and special about it. And that I really rely on the expertise that people have in the field. Because I mean, who better than people that have actually dedicated their life, like their vocation, to educating and caring about our young people. And with also the knowledge that those are our future leaders. Like, that's the future. Like, the investment in the present and in my child today is really an investment in our shared community. And I mean, I had an experience, when we first arrived here in Philadelphia about 3.5 years ago, we had a very, very, very difficult time finding any place that had an opening anywhere. I'm still probably on lists, still 3 years later. And the first place that we found was not a good fit for us. And I remember we would walk our child to the center, and when we would turn the corner and he saw the doors, he would start crying. And that, I mean, I had pretty much like a pit in my stomach every single day when I woke up to take him, and every single day when I dropped him off. And the thing that I know, when I dropped him off at St. Mary's, like even within the first week, and he was like a year and a half old, within the first week, I was dropping him off and he was running away from me, like to go start playing, which to me, that's like the proof in the pudding that I'm good, like I'm taken care of. So to not only have that personal peace of mind, but to know that he's engaging with other children his age, which I can tell you from this COVID experience, it has been very challenging, because it's very hard to explain why he's not getting the same kind of varied, wonderful programming. We're not experts, so I could probably go on, but I am so grateful to have people in the field, people like all of you, really dedicated to, the children in our community.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. It's a really great segue over to Leslie. We'd like to hear from you. And I'm hoping you could just share your vision in founding Kinder Academy and describe its impact to your communities over the past 2.5 decades.
Yes, so we did just celebrate our 25th year, and in the situation that we are in today, it seems like that is another lifetime. But we have spent these 25 years really looking to be part of our community. So this is a second career for me. I was in the business world before I came to this, so I'm a little bit unusual that way. But when I first came to this, and I'm not from here, I'm a military child, but Philadelphia is now my home. And when we were opening our center, there were not a lot of high quality choices. There were very few. And we really felt strongly about having a program that supported families and also was high quality. And it seemed like there were two camps. There were the nursery schools that were educationally based and play based, but were probably part-time. And then there were the daycare centers, which, were warehousing children. And it seemed like there wasn't much in between. And so I said, well, why can't we have a childcare center that has, a preschool setting? So it was a preschool with childcare hours, right? So parents who were working could have this option to have their children in a program with a teacher who went to school to know education isn't the only way people know how to do this work well, but it supports the foundation of understanding learning for children. So we started looking to create a hybrid that was going to give families what they needed. And we wanted to be part of the community. And we were saying things that people didn't say then, like raising quality. People didn't talk about quality in the 90s in this field. It just wasn't that way. And that I'm almost embarrassed to admit that. But we really always saw this other thing. We also had a very strong focus on providing an environment for our staff where they wanted to come to work, where they had things like health benefits and retirement benefits and a career ladder, so that they could stay and grow with us as our children grew and our families grew. And I now have children who were my babies who now work for me, which is a crazy thing. And we had lots of college students who came back and have worked for us in the summers while they're, seeking different degrees or some who are going into education. 2 of my staff members' children, 2 daughters, are in school for early childhood education right now. My nephew, who worked here from the time he was 17, graduated from Temple and is a middle school teacher. My other nephew is at Temple now going to school for education. So I love that we planted the seed of being able to give this back to our communities. But when I was watching this again, I have seen this documentary before, and it's always so moving to me. It speaks to me in a very strong way. And the narrator said, at the start, there were rich extended families, and they were there all the time. And, I don't know if it's God's design or human design, or like they said, the people who didn't have the right responses got eaten. But there's definitely a design in there that we are supposed to create communities for children, for them to grow up, to feel safe and loved and secure, and to shoot for the stars. And in early childhood, if we provide environments where they know the teacher is going to be the same teacher every day, where they know they can expect high quality experiences and activities, and everything's not going to be perfect every day. And it's not pink fluffy clouds and, sugar cookies. It's hard work. It's really hard work. But parents know that they can trust us, and children know that they can trust us. And when we have teachers like Alex who are coming into the classroom and saying, we're going to make sure you're safe and well cared for, but wow, check out this stuff we're doing. And we're going to learn about photosynthesis, right? When a 3-year-old says something like hypotheses or photosynthesis, the parents are like, what are they talking about? But we say, let's go look at the trees. What's happening to the trees now? And so it's the foundation for physics and biology and calculus that they're learning with us. And it's so important that that foundation starts with protecting children and protecting families and creating advocates for children and for our industry. And we have an opportunity in this COVID situation to say it's time for societal change. And look what has happened to our children with us not there. For parents to get back to work, we have to provide these environments. And even more than before, we're going to have to think about the health and safety of our children, the mental health, what has happened in these 6 weeks since they've been with us, the stress on families and the stress on children. That stress response they talked about, we're living that now. And so I'm here, and I'm so fortunate to get to love what I do. I love what I do. I love what I do. And we need really good, strong people to come into this industry and to say, I'm here because this work is important. And we need parents. Christina, we need you to tell people it matters that my child has a teacher like Alex, and everybody else's child has a teacher like Alex who gets paid enough to be able to stay here and not have to work at Target in the afternoons. So I'll let you move on, because I could keep going on that for an hour, Elizabeth, but.
Well, thank you so much. I hope we'll get, I know there was a question in the chat box that touched upon what you were discussing, and I hope we'll get to loop back into some other topics. But you brought up the changing situation with childcare in the new COVID-19 environment. So I'd like to just segue into what that means for those of us in early learning, people who are caring for children, families, and for the broader society. To the value of early learning to maximizing brain development, social emotional growth, executive function, etc. Childcare providers throughout the U.S. are experiencing extreme financial stress due to the COVID-19 crisis, and so many families who are staying at home. And in Pennsylvania as well, Pennsylvania and the U.S. are seeing a huge proportion in danger of going out of business, which brings about a new question. How will we have an economic recovery if there is no childcare, if families cannot find a place for their children to be cared for while they return to work or while they seek new employment? There's a lot of layers to this topic, but Leslie, I know that, of an owner of multiple sites, this has hit Kinder Academy hard, especially as you continue to try to provide high quality care. Could you just describe how this has impacted your business and how the availability of future funds will impact your ability to provide high quality early learning as opposed to care?
So my fear is that when the world opens up again, or when the US opens up again, or Philadelphia opens up again, that there's a rush for families to have to get back to work, and that we haven't done what we need to do to put the infrastructure in place to make sure that children are safe. And there's lots of not spectacular childcare out there. And I worry that many more children than before even end up in those places because it has been hard to hold on. We were in a very unfortunate place, and I had to lay off my staff. And it was a very hard decision to make. And everything happened so quickly. And we made that decision because I'm so invested in my staff. I was so worried that if we didn't let them go get unemployment, that the wait to get unemployment would be so long they wouldn't be able to hang on. That, you know, people are so vastly underpaid in this industry that they don't have, you know, 6 months of income in the bank or a month of income in the bank probably. And that if we tried to hang on until the money ran out, two things would happen. One, the money would run out and then we wouldn't be able to reopen. And two, we would have put them in a queue for unemployment that is so long that they'd be more injured in the long run. It was a very hard decision for me. I always joke that I would fight my own mother's unemployment, right? That we try to keep everybody employed all the time. And then we went to this other place where we said, let us help you get this. Here's all the information you need. Here's how to fill out the form. We were doing technical assistance to help people get everything that they were entitled to. Unemployment, medical, food banks, all of these things. And so our focus very much shifted. For our families, we were trying to make sure who was safe. We have families who are not safe. Our demographic has less than 1% of our families pay privately here. So they may pay for extended hours privately. We do braided funding. We'll take anybody's money in the state, and I'm happy to do so, so that we can support families. But my families here are poor. And they're the working poor. So they're living hand to mouth. So then we had to find out, you know, who was at risk for, who's food insecure, who's housing insecure, who's going to have to continue to work and will need resources for their children. And so we spent a lot of time trying to mitigate the challenges that people were going to face. This is all new. We always did some of that, but not with 500 families. You know, we were here on Monday and then not here anymore. It wasn't we know in June our numbers are going to drop. How do we support families? It was tomorrow this crazy thing is going to happen. So I had this great level of fear that our people are left floundering, but also that we want to be here to reopen. And so what do we have to do to make sure that we can reopen? How do we make sure that the bills that have to get paid, and the bills that don't have to get paid, those people are going to have to wait, and who are they? It's managing the small business loans that are not user-friendly. We'll leave it at that. But trying to figure out how we go forward. What's the plan to call people back? What are the safety issues, the health issues that we're going to have to worry about? I don't have masks for everyone because you can't get them. So what does it mean when people come back and we have to make sure they're safe? The state guidelines that are coming out are not conducive to the early care environment. Having meetings, all day is a meeting for us. So having meetings with no more than 10, how do you manage that? And what used to be 20 or 25 people with the staff and support people in a classroom, what does that mean? Who's medically fragile on our staff that it's dangerous for them to come back? All of these things that are new. It's the brave new world. And, you know, we keep using the phrases, it's going to be the new normal. There will be a normal, and we will come back and we'll do this work, but we're not going to come back and babysit children. We're going to come back and we're going to do really high quality care for children, and we're going to really support our staff and make sure that everyone is getting what they need and help families get back to whatever it is that we're doing. I don't know what that will be. I wish I did know, but it's a really terrifying place. Yeah, it's a terrifying place.
Well, thank you so much. And we'll hopefully we'll be able to get everyone's support in voicing the need for support for our childcare industry before we wrap up today. I'd like to hear, Christina, I'm wondering if you could share the perspective of yourself and other parents that in your community and how you rely on childcare in order to work, how families need childcare if they're, in order to return to their employment.
Yeah, I can't go without it. Like I mean, and in watching the video, I mean, I pretty much have guilt on a daily basis about the current situation, just because my son's not getting early education at all, in the sense that, like, I mean, they're definitely, St. Mary's is definitely still doing like videos, which has been really lovely. And it's also been like a little bit of routine or normalcy as far as like having a circle time or something he's familiar with, but like, long term, I think this would be detrimental. Like, I think it would be really damaging. And I'm sure it is.
Thank you. And there's a lot being done to try to support all of the many levels of this issue. I know we're running a little bit short on time, so I want to hear just a little bit on the learning perspective that you mentioned. Alex, I'm wondering if you can share where your 4 and 5-year-old students would typically be at the end of the school year, where we are now, as they prepare for kindergarten, and what you think how you think their transition to kindergarten this year might be impacted by, missing school essentially for 6 months, which it looks likely may happen.
Yeah, sure, Elizabeth. So I really see that a few months can make a big difference for children, especially the children who may need more time to learn, more time to make that progress. So their children are missing out on opportunities to learn their sight words like we've been doing, beginning reading skills, simple addition and subtraction using materials. But these skills might not be necessary to enter kindergarten with, but for some children in the classroom who may not know the letters in their name or how to write their name, they're really missing out on that valuable time to get caught up before starting kindergarten. And they're also losing time to learn and practice problem solving with peers, that other social emotional piece, and those skills that are necessary to be able to learn in kindergarten. We also spend a lot of time in the spring discussing the transition to kindergarten, really preparing them for what's to come, and what they can expect in kindergarten. So we're reading books about kindergarten. They're usually visiting their new schools, possibly meeting their new teachers at this time. All of these things would really allow them to better grasp the idea of starting something new, and also get them excited for what's to come. But the part that's really sad and upsetting is that, not going back to school in the spring or summer means that the kids don't even get the opportunity to just say goodbye to their old classmates. I also have school district kids in my classroom, so they're not coming back this year. So they're just leaving without the opportunity to say goodbye to some of their peers that they've been in the same classroom with for 2 years. So that I can imagine, it's emotional for me, so I can imagine that would be hard for them. And it would mean that they're starting kindergarten with more anxiety and to the start of the new school year.
Well, thank you for helping us understand the learning loss that will be impacted by this. I'm sure there will be repercussions in all grades. But I'd like to hear, just to kind of bring all of these issues kind of to a more central focus. Carol, our first up is part of the Early Learning PA Coalition. And I'm wondering if you could just describe for everybody what Early Learning PA is doing to address these challenges, and how we might hope to support the early learning field to survive through the COVID-19 crisis.
Yes, Elizabeth, and so I'll be very brief. I think you've gotten a really great picture of you know, the work that there is to do, and truly we all get that that's so across the country in general. But in order to ensure that childcare programs, pre-K programs are ready to open and be high quality, we want to make sure that there's investment in the field. So we've made a request to the governor that the federal stimulus money that's coming into the state, that be directed towards ensuring that we have programs that can be sustained, especially the high quality programs. That there's funding that allows for the state funded programs like Pre-K Counts program and the Head Start program, and also federally funded programs, for those programs to continue to receive those payments so that they can continue to be ready, because obviously it takes something to ramp back up. And in Leslie's case, where you know you have a staff that's laid off and she's staying in contact with them, but it takes something to start back. And we don't want programs having to then look to start to rehire, needing to rehire. So it's really critical for us to keep those programs whole. Same with, you know, looking at ensuring that there are protections against suits, lawsuits, tort protections, etc. Money for being able to clean so that families feel that their children are going into a safe environment, and money to be able to educate providers and teachers around any new health and safety regulations, you know, funds to ensure that, you know, the funding that they're missing can also be made up. Okay, so, you know, there's a whole world of that, plus, you know, policy changes and directives that we need. To Leslie's point, how does social distancing look in a childcare environment? So there's a lot that needs to be thought through. And we're working to ensure that, number one, that the field can be sustained, first of all, which is super critical. If there's nothing there, programs completely go out of business, we're in trouble. And the country's in trouble and the state's in trouble. So that's the first priority, ensuring that, you know, that programs can be sustained and they have the funding necessary to be able to quickly reopen.
All right, thank you so much, Carol. And for anybody who's interested in taking action, I have placed a link to contact your legislators and urge them to support early learning funding through this crisis in the chat box, if you'd like to quickly sign and send. And then we have some questions in the chat box. I think the first question asked about how to sort of emulate the "it takes a village" philosophy in modern times when the village is sort of scattered. And I think, Leslie, you spoke to that in your mission to provide high quality care, that you were building the village around the children with high quality staff and including families. And Christina, it sounds like you're experiencing that at St. Mary's with a program who strives to really nurture the children and include the families as well. So I think the answer to that is with high quality care. Somebody commented that there aren't too many programs that provide, you know, wonderful and varied programs for children. And again, I think they'll go back to high quality care and the difference a child experiences in sort of a more standard place of care compared to a place that is striving to provide high quality. In Pennsylvania, only about 30% of children who are receiving childcare are attending a program such as St. Mary's Nursery School or Kinder Academy. So more support is needed because not many business owners work as hard as Leslie and the owners of St. Mary's to ensure that children and staff are cared for in a way that allows for this village scenario to take place. And then a logistical question about these issues will really be exacerbated if businesses are allowed to open while schools are closed. Childcare providers are scrambling to figure out how they'll meet the needs of school-age children who won't be attending school for the rest of the year, but who will likely need care somewhere if their parents are going to return to work. Then we have a question about a focus on creativity and programming. To nurture creative strengths in children. Alex, do you think you'd be able to speak to how children's creativity is embraced by your classroom setting and your interactions with children?
Sure. So, I always give the kids some freedom in what they choose to do. And, I might lay out the materials or start by setting it up, but kind of how they use it is all kind of up to them to see what they come up with and what they're going to choose to do with it for that day. And then just having those discussions with them too. I'm not always leading everything in the classroom. They have a part in and say in what we're doing that day, or how it's going to look, or just kind of being working with them. So it's not just me talking to them, but also the discussions and having them be involved in it.
Thank you so much. That's a great example of how children's creativity is supported by high quality programming, that things are available, but not really directed. We are at our 11:30 stop time. I'm happy to stay on this meeting for a few minutes and answer additional questions. I'm also placing the website for our organization, First Up, in the chat box if anybody would like to log in and see what we have available. We're also on social media at First Up Early Ed, which I believe was tagged in the communications from Anthony prior to the event. But thank you everybody so much for coming and for learning more about the early learning field. I know most people, since this is the Department of Education, are already interested in ensuring a quality education for our society. And hopefully you have a stronger appreciation for how vital it is to provide that early learning from the first day. If you have additional questions, my email is also in the chat box. And feel free to reach out anytime. First Up provides support for teachers, for education programs, as well as public policy and advocacy to ensure that there are policies and funding that support high quality early learning. And thank you again. Thank you to our panel, Christina, Carol, Leslie, and Alex. We couldn't do this work without you all. Thanks everybody for coming today.
All right, and thank you, Elizabeth, for setting this all up. It was very